Joseph Bolton. How are you?
Hey, I am doing very well. Good to talk to
Excellent.
you, Rich.
Glad to have you here and share your story with the audience. It's quite a bit of interesting things that you've accomplished over the years.
Oh, yes, yes. Well, I was 25 years in the Army. I was a paratrooper. I served in Afghanistan. And then lately, last couple of years, I've turned to writing and family research. And I took the story of my mother's ancestors, Quebec ancestors and Algonquin ancestors, and turned it into the Old Grandmother's Tree book series.
Perfect. Perfect. Let me run through a little bit more of a briefer, or not necessarily briefer, but a little bit more elaborate intro for you. As you mentioned, you are a U.S. Army Ranger, graduated from the United States Military Academy at West Point, served 18 years with a combat tour in Afghanistan as one of two space operations officers with the U.S. Army's 10th Mounted Division. You're an author and storyteller. You're the creative visionary behind Old Grandmother's Tree, a collection of original French-Canadian folk tales woven with themes of family, history, and cultural folklore. Each provides cultural preservation, which builds on your French Canadian and Native American ancestry to craft unique mythology infused folk tales grounded in real family history. Your books are published with rich storytelling and art, um, both volumes one and two, which feature your richly woven stories paired with Natasha Pelly Smith's stunning illustrations, as you mentioned, out of Toronto. And you've been featured in media and speaking engagements. Most recently appeared on the French Canadian Legacy podcast and the famous interviews with Joe Domino podcast. You're also available to speak at community organizations, bookstores, libraries, and more.
That's it.
In a
That's
nutshell.
me.
So, like I was saying before we hit record, I don't have a whole lot of structure other than my basic first question, which is, where were you born, and what was life like as a kid for Joseph?
Okay, I was born in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, and at a time that I would call the twilight of the golden age of French Canadian culture in New England.
All right.
My mother's family was French Canadian, so I was definitely immersed in a lot of the cultural trappings of French Canadian life. Very Catholic. My grandparents' home had, crucifixes and pictures of saints everywhere. My grandmother would lead the family in, rosaries. I remember going to midnight mass for Christmas at the French church St. Cecilia's one time, and afterwards went back to my great aunt's house. We had toutière, which is a French Canadian meat pie.
Uh-huh.
So I was very immersed in the culture. But interesting enough, I didn't learn French as a child. My mother did not speak French. And
Interesting.
although my grandparents did speak French,
Okay.
they did not encourage my mother or my mother's siblings to learn French. But I
Hmm.
was still very interested in, where do we come from? You know,
Right.
a place called Quebec. And, we'd visit there as a child, but I didn't really feel that connection at first. I just knew that this was a place that, my mother's family came from.
Right.
So that's kind of like what it was like as a child. So I was
Okay.
very much curious. I was a curious child. I love telling stories, love telling stories to my friends.
Yeah.
I would try to convince them that my stories were true
Okay.
because so I was a very imaginative kid as well. So
Right.
that's
Right.
my childhood.
Got you. Was elementary school um fairly easy for you to navigate based on that imagination, or were you kind of one of the kids that was just wanting to stay back out of the spotlight and kind of just
It could
blend?
be difficult sometimes because I was, a very smart kid. very
Yeah.
smart kid, and I
Okay.
think my teachers didn't know how to handle it. This is like the late '60s and early '70s. You know, teachers weren't they didn't know how to handle that.
Right.
Certainly, my fellow kids didn't know how to handle that either. And I didn't know how to handle it. So it really created a lot of tension. It
Right.
took a while for me to grow out of that a little bit. Um, but yeah, I mean, I do remember the neighborhood kids, you know, telling them this elaborate story that we were all commissioned into the U.S. Army so that we can fight the British, which are coming to invade our neighborhood.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and weapons, we were going to get real weapons. They're coming. It's just a matter of time. That was one thing. Of course, my friends all knew. It was like fourth grade. They all knew that I was, you know, full of it. But
Right.
we all had fun pretending anyway. And yeah, so I was very, like I said, very imaginative and loved my stories. I was easily spooked as a
Okay.
child, of course, because that's just another side, you know, a feature of
Yeah.
having a great imagination as a kid. You know, so and I was also the oldest of five, so I had four younger brothers and one or three younger brothers and one younger sister.
Okay. Did you have did you have any other family members that were military where you got that imagination from?
Oh yes, yeah, my uncle, my mother's sister's husband was a helicopter pilot in Vietnam.
Okay.
And so that was really, you know, I remember that. I remember listening every morning on the radio, on the AM radio we had in the kitchen. We hear the latest thing reports from Vietnam, and it was very scary to me, but it was fascinating at the same time.
Right, right.
And my uncle was away for two tours, and the second time he went away, it seemed like forever, even though it was only a year. And it was so
Yeah.
strange to see him again. And one of my mother's younger brothers also was in the army as well. So yeah, I was definitely influenced by that. So maybe that's why I use my imagination to tell stories about that we're in the military now as kids.
Right, right. Exactly. Exactly. What type of work did your parents do? Were they in any creative fields or was it just general work and life?
No, well, my father was a very good mechanical engineer.
Okay.
And maybe this is one thing, I was never an engineering type. Was not a good person for details.
Yeah.
I could always see the big picture. But what my father was very good as a mechanical engineer was he could immerse himself inside a drawing, a two-dimensional drawing of like a device, and
Yeah.
he could immerse himself into as a 3D object and navigate through it. It was a real gift that he had. And I think I inherited that in the sense that I'm very much a visual person.
Right.
And certainly when I wrote my stories, I didn't, you know, I didn't outline them or plan it out. I would see my characters interact in an environment as a movie. I would see
Okay.
it as a movie first. And the movie would play in my head over and over again until finally I put it down into the computer itself. So I think that's one aspect I got from my father. And my mother was a registered nurse.
Okay.
But I don't remember her actually telling too many stories. But I do remember her mother used to write poetry and wrote some short stories.
All right.
And I feel bad about that because I can't find them anywhere. I don't know whatever happened to them. So I have no
Yeah.
trace of them. But so perhaps I inherited some of my desire to tell stories from her.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I'm kind of picking up that some of that was a trickle down effect uh,
Sure.
in that creative gene. Um, were you able to experience both sides, your grandparents as a kid?
Well, my father's side was very different from my mom culture. They were English Irish
All right.
and you know very much kind of you know that New England you know
Yeah.
blue collar Italian excuse me Irish blue collar type family. You know they
Yeah.
smoked, they drank, but my grandfather, my father's father, I do remember that he was actually a very kind man. Sometimes he
Okay.
could be stern, but he was also deeply religious. But he didn't really, you know, broadcasted and all like that. He would always say the rosary every night before he went to sleep.
All right.
But I didn't even know that as a child. I'd only found that about after he died because he just kept that kind of that religiosity to
Yeah.
himself, but it was very important to him. And
Yeah.
there weren't any crucifixes or saints in their home. So it was very different. But I love that my dad's side of the family, but they had a very different origin story.
Yeah.
Um, and I didn't really learn much about them until much later. But my mom's side, I think I was more fascinated with it because there were stories, there were family stories
Yeah.
that we could tap into. One was that my mother's mother, her parents, for many years after they were married in the early 1900s, they couldn't have any children. So
Mm.
they drove up from Rhode Island, where they were living at the time, went to Saint Anne de Beaupré Shrine in Quebec City,
Okay.
and they prayed for a child. And they stayed there over, I think, like a month or two with relatives up there in Quebec.
Yeah.
And the legend is that my great grandmother left Quebec expecting her first child. So
Wow.
that's a family legend. And and then my grandfather, my mother's father, would talk about visiting his cousins up there in Quebec and going to the old family, Meunier family farm.
Uh,
So, and my mother and my mother's siblings would talk about how, as a family, they would go up into Quebec and visit various shrines, go to Montreal, go to Quebec City. And so there were stories that I could tap into, but I always wanted to know more. So there's like, okay, so I know, you told me about my great grandparents, but what about their parents? And what about their parents?
yeah.
And I remember having a sense that there's a much bigger world behind the curtain that I couldn't really, see through
Right.
or, understand because at the time we didn't have access to the tools that we have.
Right.
So as an adult, when you can start using Ancestry, and I gave my mother and some of her siblings a DNA test.
Okay.
My mother was the oldest of 11, by the way,
Oh
11
wow.
children. So, in fact, my mother's youngest sister is only 4 years older than me. So
Yeah.
they were like more like big sisters
Yeah.
than my aunts. But anyway, I gave them a DNA test. And it's interesting as we always growing up, we were told my mother's family was 100% French. And the DNA test told a rather interesting story that wasn't true. They're mostly French, and culturally, they certainly were French Canadian, but they
Mm.
also had a little bit of English
Okay.
ancestry. They had a little bit of Spanish, and they also, surprise, Native American ancestry.
Okay.
And we didn't know that, but I did find out years later. This has all happened after my grandfather already passed away. But I found out from his first cousin that they did know about the Native American ancestry. It's just
Mm.
that my grandfather just did decline to tell us.
Right.
And I'm not
Right.
sure exactly why. Maybe it was the product of the time back in the 30s and 40s when he was growing up.
Yeah.
But he knew, he did know. But so anyway, I discovered this. I said, "Whoa! So this is interesting. This my mother's family history is a little bit more complicated."
Right.
The Spanish came from a Spanish soldier who joined a French regiment and went to Quebec and settled and stayed there.
Huh.
The native ancestry came from four I call gateway native ancestors. One was a Penobscot
Okay.
named Matakawando from Maine.
Yeah.
Two of them were Mi'kmaq from Nova Scotia. And that's not uncommon for French Canadian to have an ancestor like that.
Right.
But it was my Algonquin ancestor her story was most inspiring and probably the best documented of all of them. And her
Wow.
name was Mithyogoku. And the details of her life, when she was born, when she was baptized, when she got married, it was all and when she died, it was all recorded by the priests up in Trois-Rivières where she lived.
Nice.
And so what I found was this. fascinating story about this woman that she started life. She married young, another Algonquin back in, oh, it was 1650, let's say.
Okay.
She had two small children. And in 1652, the Mohawks came up from New York, raided their village. Her husband was killed. Her two children were kidnapped. And so at 22 years old, she lost everything. She
Wow.
lost her husband. She lost her two children, and she never knew what happened. What was the fate of her children? They just were taken from her, and she never knew what happened to them.
Mm,
And a person like that, especially young, it's easy to feel a sense of bitterness or want to give
sure.
up
Yeah.
or anger, and you become a wounded person. Um, but all the indications are that she actually survived and thrived afterward. And she married a French settler 5 years later named Pierre Cauch, and then together they became my ancestors. But at the end of her life, when she died in 1699, the priest in Troy Riviere, he wrote this of her. He said, Mithyogoku lived a full life with dignity, respect, and love, a courageous and loving Algonquin woman.
Wow.
And so she began her young adult life with great tragedy.
I've got
But at
chills.
the but at the end, when she died when she was 68 years old, she had, many grandchildren at that time,
Yeah.
and she died respected within the community of Trois Rivières by the French and the Algonquins.
Hmm.
That somebody, and for a priest, and this, remember, now this is 17th century, so
Sure.
for a priest to write in his journal about when a woman passed
Yeah.
away, to take the time to write about a woman, if a European woman would be unusual, but to
Right.
write about a native woman, a First
Yeah.
Nations woman, that was
Yes.
very remarkable. So she had to have made a big impression, an impact on the people around her. And so that became, those facts of her life became the genesis of the old grandmother mother's tree storybooks.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. It's amazing. I have a similar scenario where my father is one of 11 in
Mm-hmm.
the family. My mother is one of four, but she has a uncle who's 6 months younger than she is.
Oh,
Similarly, kind of the same
yeah.
thing. And they're all from East Tennessee. Both sides of the family is from East Tennessee. And
Mm-hmm.
I grew up always hearing that we had Native American uh, in our lineage. But as I got older and started to try and figure that out, there was just no documentation whatsoever that could be
Mm.
dug up that indicated any of that. But I know in my heart and my soul, I have a deep connection to that history and culture, um,
Sure.
and try to live as best I can through those types of principles,
Mm-hmm.
based around the connections to the earth and the animals and the sky and everything like that. So I can appreciate that story immensely, especially understanding as well that history of, that priest writing about your great grandmother, um, all the way back then. Like you said, it was almost unheard of to get that type of information, or have somebody to write something like that about them, which that's fascinating to me. Very fascinating.
It is. It is. And she is the old grandmother of, her name is Mithyogoku. And she, I called her the old grandmother. And not every story, this, like in these books, there's always like multiple stories. And the stories are all interrelated and many
Yeah.
different characters, but they change settings, times. And although she's not in every story, her spirit is in every story. And sometimes she gets at least mentioned by other characters in passing to her. But she is literally the old grandmother. It's not just me that calls her as an ancestor, but there are thousands of French Canadians in Canada and the United States that have her as an ancestor.
Yeah.
And so she is literally the old grandmother, or one of the old grandmothers of Quebec.
Right. Right. That's
So,
fantastic.
so when I decided to tell her story, um, many people have written historical fiction novels about their ancestors, especially if they have a noteworthy ancestor. They write historical fiction. Well, what I did was a little different. I took her story, but I kind of retold it in the language of a folktale.
Yeah.
So I created a world in Quebec in the 17th century that was magic, had magic in it.
Nice.
There are spirits, there are trickster animal characters,
Yeah.
talking animals. I even have a brief moment, believe it or not, of time travel in the first two story
Okay.
in the first story,
Yeah.
and it's the first book. So it's very much a magic, and I chose folk tales because folk tales are a universal language. Every culture has folk
Right.
tales,
Right.
and we all enjoy them, even if they're not part of our cultural heritage. We enjoy them. Why? Because there's a universal language, and they speak to the condition of being a human being and the morality and how to live a good life. So I use the language of a folktale, the folktale style, to retell the story about my great great grandmother Mithyogoku. And as a result, so we have this book that's heavily illustrated. Within these two volumes that have been published, is about 450 full color illustrations by Natasha,
Wow.
and 10 stories, 40,000 words. Stories varies from different lengths, but it's almost a graphic novel, but it isn't.
Yeah.
But it's more than just a story with a couple of illustrations at the beginning of a chapter, or one illustration at the beginning of a chapter.
Right.
It's very different. And it's a book for everybody. People ask me, well, is it a kid's book? I said, well, adults read it, adults like it. And that's primarily who the buyers have been, as adults. They like to read it to their kids and grandkids, but it's not a baby book, even though it has these talking animal characters.
Right. Right. Very fascinating. If we go back to elementary school, um,
Okay.
and we're thinking about that fourth grade period of time when you're telling these stories and these tales to the other students, um, were they accepting of those as he's just goofing off, telling a tale, and we like him because of that? Or did you get some pushback of, oh no, that's not true, quit talking like that?
No, mostly it was the former, that they
Okay.
they had fun with it too, but they
Cool.
would go along with the idea that it was true. They wouldn't confront me with it till much later and says, we knew you were kidding and we knew you were lying. Basically, they called it lying,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it. I said, well, yeah, I guess. They said, but we went around with it anyway because we were having fun with it.
Right, right, exactly. Did sports come into play at all for you at all in your younger years?
Sure. I loved physical activity. When I was younger, my father used to take my brother and I hiking up in the mountains in New
Okay.
Hampshire. And so to this day, I still have a love of the mountains. As I got older, I was a wrestler
All right.
and I was a football player.
Cool.
And I was in my high school, I was the nose guard, which is like a nose tackle.
Yeah.
And I only weighed 160 pounds back then. I was small,
Oh
but I was
wow.
fierce. I was fierce. I would, I loved to hit people, even at 160 pounds. And I
Yeah.
always to go against centers that were much bigger than me, but I didn't care.
Right.
I would
Right.
do my best to kind of, beat them up pretty good.
Yeah.
But I
Did
loved that.
did some of that fire come from having those siblings that were around the house all the time and maybe some interactions with them?
I think a little bit.
Okay.
My brothers and I, we would wrestle, in the living room.
Right.
Um, Later on, we would play football on our knees in the living
Okay.
room.
Okay.
And usually it was me versus my two younger brothers. And so they would have to tackle me down as I moved on knees with a football. It was kind of fun, but it wasn't
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And in my neighborhood, kids, the same one I told the stories to, we would always play, smear the ball carrier game, where
Yeah. Yeah.
you you would you had the football and you'd run around there around the yard until you got tackled and somebody else
Right.
picks up the ball and they run around until you tackle them. And
Yeah.
we loved that. So we always were very physical, as
Okay.
boys. And you know so it was very natural for me to want to go into sports. And my father was an athlete. My grandfather, my father's father, was an athlete. In fact, he had a chance when he was a boy, when he was about 16, like 16, 17 years old. He had a chance to try out to go to spring training with the Red Sox.
Okay.
But his father would not give him the money for the train ticket to go, wouldn't let him go.
Oh man,
That something that stuck with him for the rest of his life.
I'd imagine.
So, but he was athletic. He loved it, and my father was a track star.
Okay.
So he didn't play football, but he could run and he could hike, and he was phenomenal like conditioning when he was younger.
Yeah.
But I loved the physicality, the physical sports like wrestling and football,
Right.
the combative sports. So it's very competitive in that way. And I think also I had a little bit of anger because I was younger. I got teased sometimes,
Okay.
or the bullies would come after me, and that's one of the reasons why I got stronger,
Okay.
just because I wanted to be able to fight back.
Yeah.
And so by the time I graduated from high school, I was a very strong, athletic, and fearless kid, and that led very naturally to joining the army. And when I joined the army, I did the hardest thing I could think of, which was being a paratrooper, and then went on to West Point. After West Point, I did Ranger School,
Yeah.
and so I always liked that physical challenge. It's always very much part of myself.
Right. Do you think some of that bullying was just based on your size at that point in time?
No, I think I had a very different personality,
Okay.
and I didn't discover this until I was like a captain in the U.S. Army. But as a captain,
Oh
we all
wow.
had to go to a course. And one of the things we had to do in the course is take a personality test. And we did the Myers Briggs personality test. Have you heard of the
Okay.
Myers Briggs?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So you want to guess what personality type I am? That
No.
what's the kind that would probably get bullied because they're just so weird.
I
Well, I'll tell you, it's
can't even.
INFJ,
INFJ. Okay.
which is
I'm,
like the rarest type.
I just recently started looking at it. I've heard of it before, but I just recently started looking at it. I'm an INF uh, T, I think, or T or P, INFTP, or one of the two.
Mm.
Um, but the J is, you're saying, more
It's
eyeballish.
no, it's INFJ. So the I is for introvert. I was very much an
Right?
introvert. So
Yeah.
a lot of people thought I was just shy, but the truth is that I would just get overwhelmed by too much stimulation of people around me. I needed a
Okay.
break and I needed time to myself. And one of the ways I did that was I was a voracious reader as a child. I would read all kind of books, even encyclopedias, anything I could get.
Okay.
And so that's one, but it's different. And then the other part was I was N, which is intuitive. So I was always seeing patterns as an
Right.
intuitive person who loved making connections. And that's one of the things that led, I think, my interest or drove me to research my family history because I love to see how things connect, even to this day. So I could see patterns. I love making connections. I love researching how things fit together, very intuitive and seeing how they fit together.
Yeah.
So and then you couple that with a person who's very imaginative. All right, then you can see all kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So INF, and then I was very much a feeler. So whenever I made a decision, even to this day, now I know that I make decisions based on how I worry about what the impact of my decisions are on the feelings of the people around me.
Okay.
Not necessarily what's best decision, but what is the decision that's going to make the people around me happiest or
Right.
least harm. And so all those things work together against you in the army to a lot of ways.
Sure.
because I didn't realize that. In fact, my personality type was so rare in the general public, but also in the military, that the instructor in the course pulled me aside and says, "You know, you're actually a pretty rare personality type. You really don't fit." And I said, "Yeah, now look, actually, now this explains a lot why I don't fit. This explains my whole childhood."
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, everything about the INFJ doesn't fit into the military. So it was always a tension. And I also think because that's such a rare personality type, and what that really means for those people who don't know what a Myers-Briggs personality type, it's not like your values or anything like that, but it's the tools that your mind uses to process the information around you and to make decisions. And so the way my brain was just wired was very different from the kids growing up. So my brain was wired differently. I was very intelligent and very imaginative. So that did those things all put together
Yeah.
made me stick out and did lead to bullying when I was younger. And it only
Okay.
really started to fade until I um, got to junior high. And then I did things like wrestling and got a lot
Yeah.
stronger.
Yeah.
And so when somebody tried that, I would push it back.
Yeah.
And it didn't happen anymore
Right.
because people
Right.
realized that I was pretty strong as a kid.
Yeah. For sure. Did you have you heard of the term empath?
I'm
Uh,
very much an empath.
okay. That's I as you were explaining it, I'm like, oh my gosh, she's an empath. Makes all kinds of sense now.
And yeah, and that's part of like being a feeler. I'm very strong in all those. And it's not always easy being an empath.
No, it is
You
not.
pick up on the bad moods of the people around you and you don't understand why you feel bad.
Right.
And I reflect that back to the people. It's like, well, you're feeling bad, so I feel bad. And now you feel bad that I feel bad. So it really becomes really frustrating. So
Yeah.
it's a challenge for relationships. But I remember going out with this one girl one time, and she literally thought I was psychic because I could read her so well. I got
Nice.
every thought that she was thinking, and in fact, it irritated her a little bit. And it
Really?
wasn't I was not so much I was psychic; it's just because I was an empath, and I just had that sense. I could really pick up things,
Yeah.
and being intuitive and imaginative, all that fed into that.
Right.
So growing up, yeah, I did feel like a very much like a different kid. So I was very intellectual. I was very smart. I was very nerdy. But at the
Okay.
same time, I could actually be very tough physically
Right.
later on as a child. So it's
Right.
very much a contradiction in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I can imagine. Completely contradictory. Um, in high school, did you have the opportunity to experience any of the creative courses at all uh, in that era of time,
Um,
like
you
art
know,
or writing or creative writing?
I really there was a time period then in high school I did write poetry.
Okay, right.
And I don't write poetry now. It just doesn't come to me. But when I was a teenager, it definitely did. And I still have those poems that
Oh,
I
cool.
wrote. And they're very imaginative. Sometimes they're very romantic.
Uh,
Um, some are a little weird. But again, I did do that. But as an adult, after high school, and I joined the Army at West Point, I really didn't do a lot of creative writing. Um, with one exception, when I was at West Point. Some of my classmates got into trouble. A whole bunch of them did for drinking, I think it was, at a hotel and underage.
okay.
So anyway, they got in big trouble with West Point, the brass. And so I rewrote a story about their adventures. Except what I did was I used them as characters, but I used nothing but lines from Shakespeare's plays.
Oh, wow.
All these plays. And I used nothing but lines from Shakespeare. And I did a lot of it from memory because I was familiar where this line would be, which play. I'll grab it, pull it out, put it into the story, and have one of my classmates speak it. And so I recreated and told the whole story. And people were fascinated by it, but they also were pretty irritated. Those people who were called out on it were pretty irritated too.
Yeah, for sure.
So that was not the only creative thing I did like back then. But I really didn't start writing earnestly in this period of my life until about 2014.
Okay.
It was right after my younger brother, the one that was closest to me in age. He died of ALS after about 3 years. So, and it's a terrible disease, and it causes a lot of suffering in those who have ALS, and it's 100% fatal.
Yeah.
So it was a very traumatic time for me and also for my family. And so I took to writing a blog, and I called this blog Augustine's Alley. And I would opine on anything I wanted to during this blog. I would talk about science, religion, philosophy, mathematics, whatever, or family history.
Yeah.
And so that was my first time. I kind of rediscovered the fact that I could be a creative person and to
Okay.
write. And after doing that for about, oh gosh, probably almost like 8 years of that, I decided to branch into telling creative stories.
Okay.
And I wrote this story that has never been published. But the very first creative story I wrote, and I put it on the Augustine's Alley, was I retold the Greek fables, created new characters, and had the Greek gods in there. And I would tell the adventure of an inventor named Phidias and his centaur apprentice named Tecton, centaur being half man, half horse.
Yeah.
And he was like a young centaur. And they would have adventures in ancient Greece. I never published that. I did have some of it illustrated though.
Oh, wow.
And it was around that time also that I started discovering my family history. And I decided I was going to learn French. And as part of my French class, I wrote a short story about talking farm animals in Quebec that sneak out of the barn at midnight and go tobogganing down the hill. And the farm wife comes out and she sees them, but instead of chastising them, she decides to just slide down the hill with them. And I wrote it based, and I used the farm wife as my great great grandmother in Quebec.
Yeah.
So that was actually the first story for Old Grandmother's Tree. Was
Okay.
actually that farm story, and then from there I realized that I just when I discovered the story of Mithyogoku, I said, well, there's a connection between my great great grandmother. She's a descendant of Mithyogoku. That's my line from Mithyogoku to me goes through her.
Right.
So then I wrote a backstory about Mithyogoku and her magic shawl that was passed on from generation to generation, and why my great great grandmother had this magic shawl. And so that's how the story got started. I didn't have this master plan.
Right.
But as I discovered more about Mithyogoku, I was like, oh, this is a person who deserves honor, respect. And so I really changed the focus of the stories to her, but I kept all the magic elements that I had originally wrote into the first story.
Right. Right. Okay. Very cool. Very cool. If we're looking at the end of high school for you, and
Mm-hmm.
the thought process of going forward and thinking about, all right, what kind of job am I going to go into? What kind of field am I going to go into? What was it that steered you in the direction of joining the military over potentially going to a college and studying that way?
Um, because I realized, especially after a frank conversation I had with my father, that I
Right.
really wasn't ready for college because I was very, very smart,
Mm-hmm.
but I was also very lazy as a student.
Okay.
So I would, get A's on my final exams, but I would never do my homework to the exasperation of my teachers. So I didn't have the discipline to do that. And my father said, why don't you join the army for 2 years? Just take a break from school. And at first, it was such a radical idea. I kind of resisted a little bit.
Yeah.
But after I thought about go ahead and do it, I knew about my uncles who were in the army, so I was familiar with it. And I said, you know what? Why not? I can just let the college thing go for 2 years
Right.
and not worry about it and go in. And then after I joined, because I had a high enough like score, an entrance score
Yep.
test,
Yep.
they called me out and said, "How would you like to go to West Point?" And so I ended up applying to the West Point Prep School from the enlisted ranks.
Wow.
So that's how I got to, into the Army and into West Point. And then after West Point, I got there. I was like, wow, I might as well make a whole career of it. And I stayed all the way through. But when I was in high school, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. My father thought I should just be an engineer because that's what he was, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
But I don't think I would have been a very good engineer. Not in the same way he was.
sure.
I was good at math, at least like number theory and theoretical math and foundations of math and the philosophy of math. I was
Okay.
very good at philosophy. I had a latent ability to write, but I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
So it took later for me to find these things. And I think if I went into engineering right away, I would have been miserable and I would have been a failure. So actually, it worked out very well that I did take that time off.
Right, right. It, when you're at West Point, is it? I'm very unfamiliar with the structure of West Point. Obviously, we in America we know what West Point represents, um, but I'm very unfamiliar with the structure and how it functions in terms of in comparison to any other school or um, anything like that.
Well,
Can you give just a
um,
brief visual of what that was like for?
it was very difficult.
Okay,
And as smart as I was, as talented as I was, I probably was a below average
okay,
student and below average person of talents at the group of people at West Point. That's how
gotcha.
good they all were. So you imagine going to a school where everyone is brilliant, everyone is almost a valedictorian, everyone is a letter person or a captain of their football team or their wrestling
Right,
team or their swim
right.
team. So you're totally surrounded by smart people. And but even then, so even though you're pretty smart where you come from, when you go to a group of everybody's smart, well, you're going to come out to either average or above average. So I was probably slightly above average, on that.
Okay.
So I had a struggle to go through academically at West Point. I never failed a course. Some courses I got A's, some courses I got D's, but I always passed.
Uh,
You had to do 20 credit hours every semester.
wow.
And so it was extremely difficult. You had every class had the equivalent of three midterms. Every class had the equivalent of three midterms,
Holy cow.
and you got graded almost every day in every class. You got graded on your homework. If you didn't do your homework, you got a zero for that day.
Right.
Or every day you would have a quiz, and you would get graded. So it was very tough. And on top of that, you had the military discipline. You had to shine your shoes. You had to maintain your haircut. You had to have a clean uniform. You had to make your bed. You had to keep your room clean. All those things could bite you in the butt
Yeah.
if you didn't track that. And you got a ton of homework. And there was never enough time to do all the homework. Oh, by the way, they make you turn the lights off at midnight. And you can get in big trouble if your lights aren't on after midnight. And you can't get up before 6 o'clock in the morning.
Oh
So
wow.
you were always feeling like you were under the gun.
Right.
So it was kind of like being a gazelle on the Serengeti and just worried about, like, okay, I'm waking up today. What's the lion that's going to eat me?
Yeah.
Uh, so it was very much a challenge for me to graduate. I mean, like I said, I was probably slightly in the percentile, so I was probably slightly below the average, or right. I was right at the average, or probably in the lower end of the average.
Okay.
So I wasn't the greatest student. There are people out there who could you know do what I did in high school, do it at West Point. Do their
Right.
get A's all the time, and they were just that brilliant. But I wasn't one of them. Not in
Yeah.
that group.
Did any of the athletics carry over to West Point at all?
I was too small to play football. Remember, I said I was 160
Yeah.
pounds, so I'm
Yeah.
not playing Division II football at
Right.
160 pounds. I was too
Okay.
small.
Got it.
So I tried lightweight football, and that was okay. But I was in a lot of ways, I was a little too big for that, and I had to like starve myself to make weight. You had to weigh like
Oh wow.
150 pounds or something. So that
Okay.
was very difficult. So I couldn't do that very well either. But everybody had to play intramurals. So you had to do
Okay.
intramural wrestling, you
Oh
had
yeah.
to do intramural basketball, you had to do, intramural soccer, but everybody had to do varsity sport, or you did a club sport, or you did like whatever the sport was. So
Yeah.
yeah, so you imagine that you have 20 credit hours of classes every week. You have a ton of homework. You have tests to study for. But oh, by the way, you still got to do sports 3 times a week. The other 2 days, you're doing marching for 2 hours after class.
Wow.
Marching, yeah, for
Yeah.
training. So, think about that. So it's really like the equivalent of almost like 30 credit hours when you think
Right.
about it.
Yeah, for sure.
So it was ridiculous. It really was. But I really love the education I got there though, because it was pure knowledge, at least at that time. I don't know what West Point is like now, what the academies are like, but at the time, it was like when you did history, it was pure history. It wasn't like ideological or anything like that. It was factual. Everything was factual.
Yeah.
Um, you got a very well-rounded education, no matter what your degree program was. If you wanted to be a mechanical engineer, you want to be a nuclear scientist, that's fine, but you still have to take Shakespearean literature, and you still
Okay.
have to take philosophy. If you want to be a philosophy kind of guy, you could do that. Or a history major, yeah, you can do that. But you still had to take a course in electrical engineering, and courses in physics, and courses in differential equations.
Right.
So what I got out of West Point was a very broad, well-grounded education, and I think that carries to this day. It helps me. It helps me by writing because I have a broad breadth of knowledge,
Right.
at least understanding of what information I need to find, to look, and what to look for if I need that information, because I have a broad understanding. So as hard as it was, I don't regret it at all. I would do it again,
Yeah.
going back there.
How did that play with your personality? Being that introvert, being that,
No,
kind of,
very difficult, very difficult.
yeah, I can imagine.
Because there's no privacy at West
Right.
Point. There's very little you time at West Point. And so as an introvert, I needed that me time. It was
Yeah.
very stressful not to get that me time.
Yeah.
Making decisions based on feelings created problems. If you're in a leadership position, you're worried about, well, am I going to, make life miserable for this person? Well, I'm going to do the opposite.
Yeah.
And so, it was very difficult. And at that time, I did not understand about the whole Myers Briggs thing. So I
Right.
didn't understand what tools my brain was using to go through my life at West Point, and
Yeah.
how I was really using the wrong tools. But if I had an awareness of it, then I can kind of compensate for that a little bit. And once I realized it much later, I did.
Right. Right. Yeah. I can imagine that your whole nervous system was just taxed the entire time.
Oh, I just felt totally stressed, totally stressed.
That's wild. Um, was it towards the end of your West Point course study that you got noticed in terms of the personality testing, or was that just after?
No, no, no. That's when I became a captain. So you're talking about
Okay, so you
like
skipped.
maybe 6 years after I graduated.
Got you. Okay,
Yeah, it's a
so
test that we all had to take, but we didn't take it at West Point.
let's stay in the timeline here then. If you're at graduation, getting ready to exit X or West Point rather, what is the mindset of how you're going to navigate moving forward? Are you thinking I'm staying into the military and I'm just going
Oh
straight?
yeah, no, I was going to stay in. In some ways, I really liked the military. I liked
Okay.
the physicality. I liked the challenge. I liked the intellectual challenge of making plans. I did like that. So
Yeah.
there were some aspects about the military I did like, and I was looking forward to doing that
Okay.
after I graduated.
Yeah.
So, that's why, and I was very much a physical person, and that's why I was ready to go do Ranger School. I was going to volunteer to do Ranger School, which was
Yeah.
also very extremely tough.
Yes.
In Ranger School, you only get like maybe 2 hours sleep a night. You're moving a couple of miles a day, maybe 10 miles a day with a heavy backpack on.
Yeah.
And you get 3,000 calories of food a day, which sounds like a lot. But when you're going through probably 6,000 calories a day,
Yeah.
it isn't. You're always feeling like you're starving, and you feel sleep deprived.
Right.
At Ranger School, I was so sleep deprived that you actually get to the point where you hallucinate.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that's amazing.
I don't recommend that you keep yourself up to do it. It was very miserable, very
Yeah.
unpleasant. Um,
How did you do um, in terms of uh, I guess you would call it ranking among the other um, fellows that were in Ranger School with you? Were you towards the top of your
oh
class or
no,
middle
no,
or
no, I was
lower?
right. No, I had difficulties there too.
Okay,
I made mistakes. I did graduate, but I had to repeat four phases of Ranger School, and that's about each phase about 2 weeks long.
okay.
I had to repeat two phases, which means I
Oh,
did half the course twice, which was pretty miserable.
yeah,
But the first time was definitely my fault. It was January. It's at Fort Benning, Georgia, and it's cold out.
yeah,
Maybe it's like below freezing. I don't know by how much, but we were going to go on a 5 mile run, and I decided to wear my thermal underwear on my legs and bottoms underneath my
okay,
BDUs as I ran
yeah,
because it was cold. A big mistake because that trapped all. Because think about it, you're running 5 miles, your legs generate an enormous amount of heat, but
yeah.
you're wearing clothes that it's designed to keep the heat in. So
Right.
I failed the run
Oh
and I
man,
got tortured and then I got recycled, but I came back again. I made it. So I was very stubborn as a person too. It's like once I made up my mind I was going to do it, I was going to do it. No matter what obstacle I came, I was going to overcome it.
okay,
The
interesting.
second time I got recycled was in Florida phase. And you got to remember, at Ranger School, there's a lot of attrition. As
Yeah,
people get injured, they get dropped from the course. There's
right,
people who just quit;
yeah,
they're gone. So the squad that I started off with got down from like 10 people down to like three,
oh
and
wow,
so us three got broken up. So I joined a new squad. Well, at
yeah,
Ranger School, they have this thing at the end of every phase. So at the end of Florida phase, for example, I was in this new squad for 2 weeks with all these guys from the Ranger Battalion. So they all knew each other.
uh,
So you have to do a peer evaluation of everybody in your squad, and you rank the top three and the bottom three. So guess who got ranked the bottom? Because everybody knows each other. They're not going to rank the bottom guy, their buddies. So
yeah.
I got ranked the bottom. So I got recycled. So I had to do the Florida phase again.
Oh man, man. Again, I'm picking up two things for you. Is one is that introverted person who just you're highly stressed about all of the things that are just taxing you from every sensory position available
Yep.
to the body.
Yes.
The other component I'm seeing is the determination to just continually do it and to push through it to you accomplish what you needed to. I saw this back when you were talking about playing sports, being on the smaller side in terms of weight class, but yet you're basically on the line going up against all these bigger players as well. One of the things that I'm seeing here too is a familial, generational determination that's coming into play based on
Mm-hmm.
what you just talked about earlier, of the devastation that one of your relatives experienced when the Mohawk people came in and raided. Um, so I'm seeing these two things kind of
Mm-hmm. Very good observation. Yes.
swirling together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, After each one of those recycles, did you just have it in your mind? I'm going to finish this no matter what, and I'm going to make it
Yes,
through.
absolutely. There's never any doubt. Now, when I failed the very first phase at
Yeah,
Benning because of my own stupidity,
yeah,
I was just mad at myself, but I was glad that I was going to get another shot.
okay,
But having get through that phase, I went through the mountain phase in North Georgia, and then I went to Florida. And to get recycled in Florida, and Florida was miserable. It was so miserable. Um, I remember learning that I was going to recycle, and I just broke down in tears. I
okay,
called my father on the phone, And I just broke down in tears. I had a good cry. Here I am, 25, 26 years old, but I was
Yeah.
just that broken at that
Right.
moment.
Yeah.
But the next day I woke up, I was fine because they give you time when you're in between cycles while you're waiting for the next group class to come in and you join them.
Uh-huh.
You get more sleep, you get 3 meals a day,
Okay.
so you get rested up.
Yeah.
So, the next day, I felt good again and got kind of stronger again where I could go back into it.
Right.
But I was devastated the first time. But the thought of quitting, it never occurred to me. I learned never to quit. That was one thing we never did as a kid. I did wrestling since like eighth grade to high school.
Yeah.
Extremely tough. There was
Yeah.
never a doubt like, you know what, this is just too hard. I'm going to quit. Never.
Right.
Football. No, you're never going to quit. Um, and I also think I learned some toughness from a job I had when I was in high school,
Okay.
early high school. There was some friends of mine that owned a very fancy kind of luxury restaurant, high end restaurant, and they went to
Yeah.
school with me.
Okay.
So these two boys went to school with me. They were older than me, but they were in my high school. We were on the wrestling team, we were on the football team together, and they said, "Hey, why don't you come work at our restaurant?" So I said, "Okay." So I did that in the summer because they're only open in the summer.
Yeah.
It's called the Ridge Terrace Restaurant, Lake George, still there, still
Okay.
owned by the family. But one thing I remember about it was they drove us hard in that restaurant because it was high end. Everything had to be perfect. You
Right.
were constantly moving. I was washing pots and pans in a hot sink for like 4 or 5 hours that every night, and there was no doubt. There was no quit,
Right.
and the other thing about that, what I learned is that they at the end of every night, and it was like open mostly for dinner. So it could be like 1 o'clock in the morning when they finally got everybody out on a Saturday night, closing down.
Yep.
Nobody goes home. Nobody
Right.
goes home until the restaurant is clean from top to bottom, especially the kitchen.
Yeah.
So every night, all the dishes had to be clean. Every night, the floor had to be swept and mopped. Everything had to be perfect, perfect
Yeah.
every night. And so there was a kind of discipline I learned from that job.
Right.
Attention to detail, which I did was kind of lacking. But the idea of being committed to follow through a job and to have a high standard with what you're doing.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I learned from that. And even to this day, when I go visit my friends and they're my age or like actually older. So, one of my friends, he's like 62. He's the younger of the brothers. The other one is like 2 years older than him. He's like 64. And their father is like 85 and he's like still working there. And, but I tell my friends, because they probably, sometimes I think they were always living vicariously through me and my adventures in the army.
Okay.
But I always tell them, I said, you don't realize how important it was, how much I learned from working with you guys all
Yeah.
those years ago
Yeah.
about, just having that attention to detail. Even to this day, I never like leaving like dirty dishes in the sink before I go to bed. It's like, no, no, we got to clean this up. Even if it's late, even if I'm tired, no, we got to make sure everything's clean and put away,
Yeah.
you know? So that was the other part I would say that really contributed to success for later in my life, especially in the army.
Yeah. I'm again similarly familiar with what kitchen life is like. My first job was at a fast food restaurant here in Metro Detroit called Tubby's Subs, and it was it was before uh, Jimmy John's or Subway, or any of those chains
Mm-hmm.
come onto the landscape. But it was constant working and cleaning and all that type of stuff. And then I went off to college to Pensacola, Florida, to study graphic design. And I thought, well, I knew I was going to have to work there. So, in order to pay for schooling, because my parents could only help me just a little bit, I was going to have to do most of it myself. So, I thought, all right, cool. Be in Florida. Let me just work on the grounds crew at the college campus, and that way I'm outside, enjoy the weather.
Mm-hmm.
They saw my resume that I worked at a fast food restaurant, and they stuck me in the kitchen,
Ooh, yeah.
having to cook for the entire campus, having to clean up for everything
Oh, yes.
after each meal, breakfast, lunch, or dinner. And you stayed until everything was clean, scrubbed down. The next days, or the next shift rather, their stuff was already prepped for them to come in.
Yep.
So I understand what it's like to have to work in that environment, and it's tough. It definitely gives you a sense of um, making sure things are in place, properly done, and
And having
having,
standard.
yeah, a higher quality of your work has to be implemented across everything.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's stayed with me to this day for sure.
Yeah, I'll eat at the restaurant in the front, but the guys, my friends still work in the back kitchen cooking. They're
Yeah,
chefs. They're not like they're gourmet chefs now. They're really good.
right.
But I'll go back there and everything looks exactly as it did back from 1980.
Wow.
See, nothing has changed. And it's funny how there's a little bit of sentimentality to me that I
Sure.
look at and go, wouldn't it be kind of fun just to go over to that big giant industrial dishwasher and start loading some of those dishes in there and pushing it
Yeah.
through and putting it away?
Yeah.
And it was that's kind of sentimentality because I realized not because I really missed the hard work. It's just that I what I really appreciate and miss is that standard, that sense of pride in work. And it was very hard, and you couldn't be thin skinned either.
Right.
Um, Originally the kitchen was designed so my friend's father who owned the restaurant, um, he had the front. He was originally from Mexico, and he's one of those guys that came. So imagine he came with nothing but literally a shirt on his back and a watch on his wrist.
Yeah.
And so he has this fancy restaurant that's worth, maybe at the time $1 million back in 1980. Very highly respected. So he's very protective of it because everything he has, he worked for very hard.
Right.
So he was a very tough boss. And I remember one of the jobs I had was I had to bring plates out go through the dishwasher. I had to take the plates, dirty plates, rinse them out, put them in this industrial dishwasher. Go through, pull them out. And then I would have to take plates and bring them to him in the front. He had a little grill outside the kitchen, just
Yeah.
outside in the dining area. And it never was always rough because either you were late with the plates and he didn't have enough, and so he'd yell at you for not bringing them out fast enough, or he would yell at you because you would get in his way as you're trying to get in his way to put plates, and he's behind the gun trying to get these meals finished off on his little grill station right there.
Yeah.
Um, and funny thing, he was tough, and he's a dear man now, and I have
Yeah.
always respect for him, and even to this day, I'm 61 years old. I still see him. I still call him Mr. Rios.
Yeah. Yeah.
And his sons are always like, when I go to the kitchen and I start to leave, he says, "Don't forget to say goodbye to Pop." And I always do, and he's always glad to see me.
Right.
But when I was younger, and he was probably like, I don't know, 40 years old in his early 40s, he was a very tough man to work for.
Yeah, for sure.
But you learn something from that, and I think learning all those things back in high school gave me the internal toughness and determination to survive, despite the fact that my brain was hardwired in a way that made it very difficult to operate in the environment it did. I compensated by just having a great sense of determination.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. If we're looking at uh, going through the second time finally in that last uh, recycle in Ranger School,
Mm-hmm.
are you starting to catch up with the process at that point?
The process, before we do go any further,
Sure.
I'm going to turn on the light because it looks like I'm in the witness protection program.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I
Having
got
that
this light
light.
back on.
Exactly.
All right. So you're asking, like, did I finally feel like, well, the process wasn't that hard. The tasks weren't that hard. It was the environment and the conditions that made the task hard.
Right.
You're just leading a squad or leading a platoon. You had to write up like some basic military orders and do attack a position, move at night as a group in the
Yeah.
darkness and attack an enemy position. And you had to maintain security that high, very much a high standard. And I think I survived in the environment because of what I learned at that restaurant,
Okay.
because of that attention to detail, that attention of this is the standard. And no matter how tired you are, you will do the task to the standard.
Yeah.
So that's the same thing you had to do at ranger school. You had a task to do. And no matter
Okay.
how tired you are from moving at night for 10 miles and you only got like 1 hour sleep or 2 hours sleep the night before,
Yeah.
you had a standard to do to execute this task, this attack. You had to maintain security. You had to, make sure you didn't get detected by the the enemy,
Right.
when you moved it. So that that lesson there is what got me, I think, through ranger school. And the
Okay.
other things helped too. But I think that part, that attention to detail, to doing a task correctly, was what got me through. And I think ranger school, it was really more that the tasks weren't hard. It's just that you had to do them right, and you had to do them right and correctly under very tough conditions.
Yeah.
That's what made ranger school hard.
Yeah. The the opportunity to take this test that really opens your eyes to your life up until that point of who you are, why you're reacting the way you are to certain situations. Did that come about as part of the structure and process of being in ranger school, or was there something that they started to recognize that they wanted you to do that test?
No, everyone had to take that test.
Okay.
So I was in a course when I got promoted to captain. Everyone had to go to this course, and in this course is at Fort Leavenworth in Kansas.
Hmm.
So everyone at this course had to take that test. So
Gotcha.
I wasn't selected for that test. I took the test. It was probably in my class. It was like, you know, 200 students, and I
Yeah.
may have been the only one that was an INFJ.
Wow.
Like I said, that's why it was so rare that afterwards, when they looked at the results, the instructor called me out and pulled me aside and explained, you're very different.
Yeah.
This is a very rare personality type. And
Yeah.
as I researched it even more, I realized that, well, it's really a bad fit for the military. So no wonder I felt a lot of stress.
Pressure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Did at that point too? Did they start to um, have discussions with you about what your future career was going to be potentially based off of that in terms of are
No.
you going to have to move into a different direction or a different field of operations?
Initially, no.
Okay.
Although when I got promoted to major, I wanted to get out of the infantry. I've been doing light infantry and moving at woods at night since I was 18 years old. I
Yeah.
was ready for something else. So I volunteered to be space operations, and
Okay.
that's what it sounds, space
Yeah.
operations. So I'd be an expert in space operations for the Army. I was one of 12 people selected in my year group, my cohort of officers.
Yeah.
So I think it was like probably 2,000 officers. I was one of 12. Um, and I thought, well, I'm going to be working in a lab, kind of a normal job. No, because my assignment officer who does the assignments, look, remember you have about your resume?
Yeah.
Okay, so he looked at my resume and says, well, you were infantry and you were a ranger. So I'm going to send you back up to the 10th Mountain Division because you are uniquely qualified to be a space operations officer at the 10th Mountain Division, which is very ranger heavy and very infantry heavy. So I
Yeah.
ended up going right back into the same kind of environment I was before, except I had a slightly
Wow.
different job.
Wow. Yeah. How the tide turns.
Yep. Yep.
When you get to that division, what does your day to day start to look like? from that perspective?
If we're not in the field, it's you get up, you get there early, maybe 6 o'clock in the morning, and you do PT for like an hour, maybe a
Mm,
5 mile run or something like that.
okay.
And then you shower, get breakfast. You're at the office by 8, maybe 9 o'clock, and you stay there till like 5, probably.
Okay.
And you work in an office. But then you go to the field, it's a totally different environment. You'd work longer hours in the field because it's considered a simulated combat environment. So that's kind of like what it was like. But we did deployments and,
Okay.
out in the field quite often.
Right.
And, Fort Drum was also cold. So we would have to go outside and run, even if it was like minus 15 degrees.
Got you. Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's tough. At, at what point did you learn that you were going to have to go to Afghanistan in that process?
Um, I learned when I was assigned as a major to back to the 10th Mountain Division. I knew they were going to Afghanistan.
Okay.
I really wasn't worried about it. I figured that everybody else had gone and I need to go too,
Got you.
and I should go. And I
Okay.
thought, I've been in the army for all these years. I should serve at least one time in a combat environment.
Got you.
And so it was never a concern in that regard.
All right.
But um, I did deploy. I was there for a year. Most of the time I worked, did highly classified work that I still can't talk about.
Got you. Okay.
And a couple of times I did get out of the wire of the base to do, go. I went on a patrol one time to a village where they gave clothes and pencils and notebooks to the kids and stuff like that in that village, which
Yeah.
was a very good experience too. But so that's what it was like. And by the way, I actually there was a guy there who worked as a civilian contractor. He
Okay.
was British. He worked for DHL, I think, like the shipping company,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he had pretensions that he was going to be a big director. So he got a bunch of us together at Christmas time to put on a play for the base, to put on a Christmas Carol,
Okay.
and I got to play Marley,
Really
the ghost of Marley. Yes,
nice.
and it almost cost me my life.
What?
Yes, yeah.
How did that
So
happen?
how did that happen? Well, one night, I was in costume. We did a costume rehearsal,
Yeah.
and I was all made up. So how Marley looks like. He's got
Yeah.
the bandage on. He's all gruesomed up. He's a ghost. He's a dead
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
So anyway, and I got chains on, right?
Uh,
So here's, I'll caveat this also. Remember, we're in a combat environment. So even inside the wire at Bagram Air Force Base where I was at, everyone is armed.
yes.
Everyone's armed with a weapon and live ammunition.
Correct.
You always are all time unless you're showering.
Yeah.
So anyway, so everybody's armed. It's nighttime. I go out there. My fellow cast members are going out near the mess hall, and we're kind of like trying to promote the play. And this is a goofy thing for me to do. So anyway, there was this one guy out there by himself, and he was just out there looking at me, and I kind of did like this a little bit, and he just
Right.
stared at me, and then finally I was like, all right, I just walked away. So the next day, one of my coworkers, another major, sat next to me, and at breakfast in that mess hall, and she says, "Hey, guess what?" And I go, "What?" I said, "Last night you almost got shot." I said, "What? What happened?" He says, "Well, that guy you were standing in front of, he just got to the base. He just got there, and
Oh,
he thought you were an escaped Taliban. We had there was a prison on Bagram, so he
oh
thought
no.
I was an escaped Taliban.
Holy cow.
So he was thinking of shooting me." I'm like, "Oh."
Whoa.
I said, "Well, that's a story. Can you imagine that? I'm sorry, Mrs. Bolton, but your husband was died dressed as Jacob Marley in the combat zone." So, Army mate, imagine the headlines:
Yes.
Army major dies by fratricide in Afghanistan, dressed as Marley's ghost. That would have made the national news.
Oh, for sure.
It would have made the national. I would have been immortal,
Exactly.
immortalized. But I had other things I had to do in my life, I guess.
Almost beyond Jacob Marley at that point. He would have been immortalized.
Yes. And
Oh,
now I think back, I get a little bit scared. It's like, that was kind of frightening. I should have been more scared. And I was
right.
like, afterwards, I was like, well, I guess we can laugh about it now. You remember John Candy saying that line one time in
Yeah,
Planes, Trains, and
exactly.
Automobiles? Oh, we can laugh about it now. But it was, yeah. So that was it. I almost got shot.
Close call.
But that did tap into my creativity. And I thought that I was going to retire from the army when I was done with Afghanistan. I said,
Okay.
hey, I like this acting stuff. Maybe I should try to do it. I never did. But I did have fun doing it. And I do have a video of it somewhere.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
Yeah. So
So when you did decide to retire, what was your thought process of, all right, I think I've run my course with the military. I think I'm going to go ahead and retire. What is the thought process of what you're going to do next?
initially it was I wanted to do something different. Yeah, I was doing the military thing, so I was 18 years old.
Yeah.
I was 43. So I
Okay.
was 18 now. Been doing nothing but military stuff. And I
Wow.
wanted to discover who Joe Bolton was outside the military. And so I really thought about I didn't know what I was going to do, but I just knew I wanted to do something different and I wanted to be totally different from the military.
Yeah.
And and so initially I joined as a to be the operations officer for a transportation company.
Okay.
And it didn't pay much. It didn't pay as much as I thought. As now, like hindsight, is that I should have been asking for. But anyway, I did this job, and one of the things that they ran like tour buses, they did school buses, and so you're in charge of planning where all these buses go, assigning drivers, stuff like that to it.
Right.
And I quit after 6 months. I
Okay.
just flat out quit. And I quit because it was nobody had any standard. All the things that I took for granted in
Ah,
the military, they didn't have standards. They didn't try, and the company was cheap. They would invest in software that they should get. They were still this is 2008 or 2007, and they're
yeah.
using MS DOS.
Holy crap.
Okay, it's like 1992.
Yeah.
It's like software. It was awful, and you couldn't do it. And I tried to tell them, I tried to get them like that. I tried to get the company to invest in GPSs for the buses. So I'm like, look, all these buses are late all the time. I said, if we had GPS, you could track where these buses are, and parents call, where's this bus? You can look on the screen and see it. Wouldn't
Yeah.
do it. So
Wow.
finally, I just quit. And it was I didn't know what I was going to do after I quit at the time, but it was the best feeling in my life. It was the first time. Think of my entire life. I've
Yeah.
never
Yeah.
quit anything.
Right.
So I actually was so happy to have actually quit something that I could
Okay.
say, you know what? I'm not going to do it. I'm going to say no.
Right.
And my entire adult life, I was never in a position to say no to anyone. Like,
Yeah.
no, I'm not going to do that. So it felt so good. It was such a sense of freedom. But as it turned out, I did get a call and I did get pulled into the government, the military again as a
Okay.
civilian worker, civilian contractor. So I kind of went back into the same environment. And maybe that's because I kind of recognize that I've been doing that ever since that, well, that's what I am.
Right.
I, and I'm good at it
Yeah.
and it's okay. And I can kind of balance who I am. It's not like I can still say no. And as a government contractor, if I don't like a job, I can always quit or leave it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so that's kind of like what happened afterwards.
Okay. Yeah. Once you make that first decision of I can quit this, and there's not really real ramifications of me doing it other than the fact that I'll be free. It changes something in your mental state that allows you the freedom to be able to make choices moving forward, knowing, you know what, I'm going to do this. If I like it, cool. I know I can stick with it. If I don't like it, I'll just quit again.
Right.
There's a sense of that freedom of being able to say no to something
Hmm.
that switches something in the brain, that allows you a freedom that many people, even just in regular society, you're in a military situation most of your life, but people are just in regular society going to work every day to a job that they can't stand, and they don't always realize that they can make the choice and say, no, I don't want to do this. I want to try something different. Um,
Right, right.
and this is a thing too with many creatives, across the industries. They get into a particular field and they're doing it and they're doing it and they can do it and they're, doing it well, but it's not filling their soul. It's not bringing joy to their heart as a creative. And a lot of times they don't realize they have an option to be able to pivot and
Hmm.
to do something differently. If they want to stay creative, they can do that, but they don't always have it in their head that they can make those pivots and take what they've learned in that particular field they're working in and look at other options to see how it may translate.
Right, right. Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
that's one of the things that I try to bring out, when a storyline provides that opportunity, is that creatives that are stuck in something that they feel they can't get out of, that it's just draining the life out of them, if they're able to just look at what their skill set is and see how it may apply in another industry, then it opens up that opportunity for them. Opens up the opportunity for them mentally too, to be able to regain some of that confidence that got drained out of them, just sticking to one thing and thinking, I can't go anywhere else, um,
Right.
which is
And
amazing.
and I think I always had an independent streak too.
Yeah.
And that was suppressed when I was in the army.
Yeah.
But I still remember that day. It was January 8th, 2008. So I remember that day. And I remember taking a walk out at night after that very day I quit and feeling so good. I was like, I don't know what's going to do next, but I quit. I actually took control. And
Yeah.
it felt so good to take control of my life and to
Right.
do what I wanted to do. And I think I am. Some ways, I'm very much by the book in some aspects I can. Other times I can be very much a contrarian, a
Yeah.
person, or I'm very skeptical of the conventional wisdom, especially conventional wisdom.
Yes.
It's like if you want to argue with me, don't use emotion, use reason and facts,
Yeah.
and tell me, logically what you're trying to do. But if you're just going to say, well, this is the way we always do it, I would always question that. And
Yeah.
that was one of the things that probably made me kind of tense sometimes in the army because the army's always full of, well, this is the way we always have done
For sure. For sure. What's your astrological sign, Joe?
it. Pisces.
Pisces. Okay. Water. Water sign. Interesting. Interesting. There's uh, as I'm looking at that and then looking at the storyline too, there's a flowing movement that you've had in
Hmm.
your story, as well. Fascinating. Um, Once you get back into doing the contract work for the government and realize, all right, I'm back in this environment again of the military. Um, at what point do you start getting the ideas that I think I want to delve into this writing again, bring this back up to the forefront? Earlier you
Mm.
were talking about the poetry and stuff that you were doing.
Um, well, it was really after my brother passed away in
Okay.
2013 with ALS. And so my writing was a way of soothing myself and expressing myself and talking to myself, which as
Yeah.
an introvert, you're okay with.
Right.
I shared those thoughts, on a website, and that website's still there. It's still active. I haven't put anything in there in a while, but
Okay.
it was like, hey, these are my thoughts, and I'm going to write whatever I want. So I enjoyed that freedom, the sense of
Yeah.
independence, and so that's when I learned to like writing again. And then later on, it led to doing some creative work, and then that's when I started getting into, writing this book, and it kind of, a lot of factors merged in why this book came when it did.
Okay.
One was I had rediscovered my joy of writing. Um, I rediscovered my French Canadian and Algonquin roots. So that sense of intuitive wanted to make a connection. How
Yeah.
do I connect to the people in Quebec? How do I connect to the Algonquin community in Quebec?
Right.
And so this book became that vehicle to do that, to make that connection. It was my letter to them and say, this is who I am. This is who I discovered about my past. This is what I discovered about something about our shared past.
Right.
And I wanted to make a connection. And one of the ways, two ways I did that, I was never a shy person. People say, introverts are shy. That's really not true.
Yeah.
But when I started writing this book, the first two volumes, Mithyogoku, I actually, and French Canadian, it was right at the end of COVID and the border finally opened back up. And I hadn't been back to Quebec for a long time, decades.
Yeah.
And I just pointed to a place in the map, said Magog, Quebec. It's just over the Vermont border. And I went up and visited this place. And I just went and talked to people. I learned some rudimentary French,
Okay.
and spent some time telling my story to the proprietors of the bed and breakfast I was at. I love staying at bed and breakfast.
All right.
If you're gonna go someplace, you need to stay at a bed and breakfast because that's where real people live.
Right.
And you're
Right.
going to be in their home, and that's how you're going to learn about the culture that you're in or wherever the place you're in. So anyway, I stayed at this bed and breakfast. I talked to her and her husband. I went to these little tiny little restaurants on the side street of Magog. There was this little place called Chez Paul, which is like Paul's place, and they
Okay.
serve poutine. I don't know do you know what poutine is?
I've heard it, but I don't remember what it is.
French fries, gravy, and cheese curds.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Really good. But anyway, he served that. And so I ordered it in French. And my French was not that good,
Right.
but we all had fun with it. The people I was talking with had fun correcting me or talking to me or trying to make it work.
Yeah.
And they wanted to practice their English. And so it was fun. So I made that connection. I loved doing that. Um, about a year and a half later, as these two books were finishing up, I said, well, there's this, I wrote this story about this remarkable Algonquin woman. And I thought, why don't I reach out to the Algonquins and say, hey, look what I did. Look at this great book I wrote. And it's
Yeah.
about an Algonquin. And so I just did an internet search and trying to say, Algonquin reservations or communities in
Yeah.
Canada. And I found this Algonquin community in Pembroke, Ontario, which is a little town in kind of northwest of Ottawa, maybe about 2 hours,
All right.
and a very rural area, lots of farms, but there is very much an active Algonquin communities there. And so I just wrote to the director, I said, hey, this is who I am and this is how I connect. I said, can I send you a copy of my book that it's not quite done yet, but I'll send you the rough draft copy.
Yeah.
And I did. And a little while later, I heard back and they're like, we love this book. So
Really.
so I drove all the way. It's 8 hour drive from my house up to Pembroke, Ontario, and I drove all the way out there to meet with them. And total strangers, but to
Yeah.
share my story. And they introduced me to other members of the community, and they even introduced me to other descendants of Mithyogoku. So
Oh
I was able
wow.
to make that connection and share that book with them. And I
Wow.
still maintain that solid relationship with them. So I don't know how we got on the track, except to say that I've always had this desire to make connections.
Yeah.
And that's why I did that, use this book to do that.
Did you do you feel that some of what you had to experience in the military and connecting with other team members and unit members helped play into that versus maybe what it was like in elementary school of not really being and feeling like you're completely fitting in with everybody?
I think I've always had a desire to connect,
Sure.
but as an introvert, I always had a desire to separate too. So those
Okay.
those two aspects are always in tension within myself.
Yeah.
So it always how does it translate into real life? A lot of times it's I'll go out, I'll make a connection, I'll make a very deep connection with you in this group, the Algonquin community, or up in Magog, Quebec.
Yeah.
But then I'm going to need my space, and then
Right.
I'll kind of retreat a little bit back into myself, and a lot of times at time I'll reflect on those experiences and kind of internalize them and kind of categorize them within myself.
Yeah.
And and but I don't think there's anything in the army
Okay.
that really taught me about that. I think that was just something that was part of my makeup always,
Gotcha.
always. Because as a kid, I would always ask questions about to my mother's grandparents about Quebec and about the family history, and they could only tell me so much.
Right.
But I asked those questions because I wanted to see, well, how do I fit into the bigger picture?
Okay. What I'm seeing here too is the visual of the Pisces sign. It has the fish are inverted from each other,
Mm-hmm.
one going up, one going down. So it's that dichotomy within yourself that is experiencing one thing but wanting to do the other as well.
Yes,
Very
very
fast,
much.
very fascinating for me, somebody who's looks at those things as well. That's great. Um, Once you got to experience some of that culture and that history of the Algonquins firsthand, did that create a sense of completed connectedness to where for so long it felt as if it were a distance of connection, but you knew there was a connection. Did it bring it together for you at that point?
It did. And I remember I had this long drive, like I said, 8 hours, right?
Yeah,
And it was one night in Ottawa before I drove the last 2 hours up. So I had a lot of time to think about that. And I had really no idea about what was going to happen
right,
when I meet, because, are they going to see me as an outsider trying to muscle in on their sense of Algonquinness and on their
right,
sense of nativeness? And that can be a very touchy issue with some
for sure.
communities.
Yep.
Um, so, I was wondering how are they going to receive me? And it turns out that their communities, they were very much welcoming.
Okay.
And they said that, from their point of view, they don't measure someone's Algonquinness, so to
Right.
speak,
Yeah.
based on, what percentage they are. They said,
Okay.
that's a foreign term.
Yeah.
It's based on culture, but it's also they look at it as if you have an Algonquin ancestor, you can document it. And they said, from our point of view, you're Algonquin.
Nice.
Now, this was Paul Latteroot I had talked to. He was a director, and he told me that. But he also told me that some of the communities in Quebec have a very different mindset, that they don't think of that way.
Right.
And he says that Paul kind of explains, says our philosophy, we think, is a couple of decades ahead of theirs, because you can't keep people isolated as a population within a bigger population.
Right.
So, you know, and and status and being a Métis or a mixed person up in Quebec, and I would be considered a mixed person up in Canada because I have, Native and European ancestry, or
Yep.
being a person of status, which means that you are a member of a tribe, a recognized tribe. That's
Uh,
something entirely different.
right.
Paul's community is a mix of people who have status as recognized by the federal Canadian government. There's also a lot of people who are Métis who have partial Algonquin ancestry, but they're part of the community and recognized as such.
Okay.
So, it's very complicated up there. And based on the history of how, Native Americans have been treated
Yep.
and their status, some people are very sensitive to making people making claims of Native ancestors when they can't document it,
For sure.
especially try to take advantage of it. So it was always very clear that, I never was like pretending to be something I wasn't.
Right.
I was a person who grew up in a, French Canadian Irish household in New England. I didn't grow up in the Algonquin community. I'm not culturally Native American at all.
Right.
So I'm not claiming that, and I'm not claiming to be a member of the community. But
Sure.
at the same time, I am very firm. If anybody tried to confront me on that, I would say, look, I still have a connection. It's
Yeah.
still part of the, I'm still connected to this, even though I'm not a member. I'm
Yes.
still connected, and it still means something to me. So it's a very complicated kind of sense of connection. It's different from which way, depends on which way you want to look at it.
Yep.
Um, but I think, but their choice, where they are, they were very welcoming to me,
Yeah.
very welcoming. And I think writing the stories was the key that kind of opened the door for that kind of connection. And
Yeah.
writing the story about Mithyogoku. And so it really depends on the receptiveness of the community itself. It's up to them to decide. And if they had decided they didn't want to have connection with me, that would have been their right too, and I would have respected that.
Yeah.
But as it turned out, it was very good. And in fact, the third book I'm setting partially within their own community in Pembroke, Ontario, as a way of honoring them and honoring that connection.
Fabulous. Fabulous. I definitely understand that perspective intrinsically, especially based on uh, my family history as well, and understanding too, um, being from East Tennessee, our told lineage is Cherokee. So where my family's at in East Tennessee, it's just before you get to the Smoky Mountains.
Mm-hmm.
Once you go over the Smoky Mountains, you fall right into Cherokee, North Carolina, which is the eastern reservation there. But you also have the storyline of the Trail of Tears, where they were moved to Oklahoma. So there's a whole lot of mixed um, scenarios there. I mean, you have a lot of Irish, a lot of Scottish in that uh, area as well, the Appalachians,
Mm-hmm.
because it was mountain country. It was something that they were familiar with when they came to the U.S., so it was easily navigatable by them. So there's all that intermingling that takes place as well. And then, of course, the last name being Wright, that's English of origin. So I understand there's a mix, but yet there's this instinctual thing within you that always has this feeling of connectedness, even though you may not be able to say on paper, yes, here it is. For you, you're able to document it lineage wise. For me, I'm not able to do either one of those, but I have this instinctive sense that this is how I need to live this lifetime.
Right, right.
In terms of just some um, ethics, some respect for the earth, respect for the connectedness that is and all is, those types of things. When you had that experience with meeting the actual community, were you able to glean some of the traditional stories during that period of time?
Um, no, but I
Oh,
did get to participate in some of the tradition. Well, I would not say that's so much the stories, but there were some traditions that I did participate in. For one,
okay.
they all sat in a circle when I was welcomed in. I had the seat of honor in the circle in the center, kind of like on
Okay.
the edge, but
Yeah.
there. Um, they all kind of played drums, sang songs as kind of a welcome. They gave me a drum that I could play too. I couldn't
Okay.
sing. I don't know what I was singing.
Right.
When I left, they gave me some gifts. Some of them were kind of, one was like a water jug with their logo of their community, but they also gave me like a rope of hemp
Okay.
and tobacco, which are traditional gifts.
Yeah.
And it was some other things about the culture that were kind of interesting. Is that they treated me as an elder, and I didn't quite realize it at the time. But for example, when they were doing at the end, they were going to serve lunch. Met them at late morning, and we're going to have lunch in the office complex where they were.
Yeah.
And the food was all set. And I was like signing books and giving books to people, other people meeting them there and that had gathered.
Yeah.
And one of the young women came up to me and says, I need you to eat right now. I need you to go up and grab a plate. And I go, oh, okay, I'll get it. No, no. She goes, I need you to do it now. And the reason why is, is that they were treating me as kind of a guest elder. And as the guest elder, I had to eat first.
Right.
I had to get my food first before anybody else could touch that food.
Yes.
So there were some differences. And I had to kind of pay attention to pick up on those because I didn't get them at first.
Right.
So that was different. And
Okay.
the other thing I met when I met Paul Latteroot, he was telling me that one of his jobs was to distribute permits that are distributed by the Quebec, the Ontario government for moose hunting. Is that as a recognized Algonquin community, they're allowed extra permits for moose hunting, and so
Right.
people needed that permit so that they can get food for the winter. There were still
Yeah.
people who get a moose and they'd stock it up in their freezer for the winter.
Right.
And so it was very important. It's one of those very important jobs. So that was some of the things I did notice that there were some things different. It's more like the tradition that
Okay.
things move, decision making moves slower. It moves more on consensus.
Yeah.
It's not hierarchical in the sense that we would think of it.
All right.
So those are things that I picked up from that community. It was different from what I expected. I'm used to using a very hierarchical kind of sense and
Right.
how meetings flow, and it's very different.
Yeah. For sure. For sure. When you wrote these stories, and it came time in your mind that you needed some illustrations for them, how did that connection with Natasha come about?
Ah, very interesting. So not as a direct route as you may think.
All right.
Initially, when I wrote the very first stories, the first illustrative artist I found was a young woman named Masami Kiyono, and she is a Japanese, half Japanese American, biracial Japanese. Her father was from Japan. She was born in the United States,
All right.
and I linked up with her, and we had a very good relationship. And she was going to do full illustrations of these books, but as these books, as I writing these stories, they grew in length and complexity. She realized that she couldn't do it. I mean,
Okay.
she was good at doing the storyboard. And you know what a storyboard is? Where they
Yes.
do the rough
Yes.
sketches and they say,
Yep.
okay, storyboard here and storyboard here, and we would talk and we'd say, this is where an illustration will go, and this is what will be in the illustration, and we would do that. She was
Right.
good at that, but she couldn't finish. And I'm
Okay.
like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I got halfway through this first story that I written, and it's illustrated by Masami, and I got to start all over again, and it's going to cost money, and how am I going to do it? And so I I just Googled artist, uh, illustrator Canadian. That's how I did,
Okay.
and Natasha popped up right away. And it's hard to find an artist. It's hard to find the right artist. And if you
Sure.
are teaming with an artist for a book to be illustrated, especially as one as big as detailed or massive a project as this is, there has to be a kind of
Right.
chemistry between you to make it work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I lucked out all those ways with Masami, but not Masami, but Natasha. But um, I realized that I still needed Masami. So I hired back
Okay.
Masami to do the storyboard for me. So the process that we have developed now, these books, I write them, and as I finish writing the rough draft, I'll engage Masami. Masami and I will Zoom call. We'll talk through a chapter, and
Right.
we'll design these illustrations. At least a rough sketch. Like, this is how
Yeah.
many illustrations go in this chapter. This is what they're going to be characters are going to be doing, and then she'll create them. And it's going to be such a good partnership that I can actually see her illustrations before she does, and
Nice.
I can see how it's going to look. And
Yeah.
most of the time, it's pretty close, actually. So she does that, and she loves doing that, but she doesn't like doing the finish work. She hates getting bogged down in that. Maybe it's her own independence.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so then I work with Natasha, and then she takes these rough sketches and she creates these beautiful three-dimensional illustrations with lights and color. She's very good at if you look at these, when you look at the one behind me,
Right.
you
Yes,
can
I am.
see the
Yep.
light and the dimensionality. You can see the depth of this illustration.
For sure.
And if I had time, in a way, if I was more organized, I could show you some of the rough sketches that it came from. It looks very different.
Yeah.
But Natasha is very good at that. But she wouldn't have the patience to sit down and do rough sketches.
Right.
So it's just amazing how it came out. That I
Yeah.
have the perfect team of artists to do the work, and it works out great. I write. Masami is doing the rough sketches, and on the previous story that Masami had completed the rough sketches, and I wrote, Natasha's doing the final illustrations. So,
Nice. In terms of time frame, how long does it usually take to complete a book from start to finish?
well, the first book, it started off as one story, then it started off with two stories, and it grew to three stories. So I didn't really have a plan, and finally
Okay.
it grew to 10 stories. And finally, I said, I got to stop. So, and my artists were going to have a revolt, I think, at that
Yeah.
point, and
Yeah.
my editor is going to have a revolt. So it's like, okay, so we did it, and so we stopped. But it was probably a 2 year process, just the
Okay.
illustration part.
Yeah.
And Natasha worked very hard and long hours on that. And one thing that I discovered this first with Masami, and I was kind of aware it a little bit with Natasha. She did the finished artwork.
Uh-huh.
Was that the economics of working with an artist on a long-term project can be very challenging. So let's look at it from this way. Okay, I gotta say I'm doing a small little kids book. It's 30 pages or something like that, right? And
Yep.
I'm gonna put like 15 illustrations in there. It's no big deal. It's a simple little project. It can be done within a month. Boom,
Yep.
there it is. It's done. And let's say, oh, by the way, when you get the first batch of 15 illustrations from the artist, you look at it and go, I'd actually like to make some changes here. So she'll take those illustrations back, she'll put some more time on, and she'll make some changes. So
Yeah.
for a small book, that's okay. But when you have a big project like that, all those little corrections, all those little delays, they start adding up.
Yes.
So when you have a project that drags on for 2 years, you start exceeding the monetary value of the contract. It's almost inevitable. You're
Yeah.
going to do that.
Yeah.
So the danger is, I think one of the biggest reasons why Masami is like I couldn't do it anymore was that she outrun the contract because she would do other projects and because she had to eat, right, and I wasn't going to pay her enough to for my project isn't going to pay enough for her to live on. She had to take other projects or
Right. Right.
something come up. So it got to the point where I already paid her for the work, but the work wasn't done.
Okay.
So she's still going to commit to do it, but it was like she's almost like working for free at that point.
Right.
You outrun the value of the contract. And that's the danger, I think. If you, as a writer, are going to do an illustrated book that's very long like this,
Yeah.
you have to be manage the contract with your artist very carefully. And of course, the other part is burnout.
Right.
You have to pace yourself. It's not like I'm hiring a contractor to put a pool in a backyard. Okay,
Exactly.
it's not that same way. You can't just demand art. You have to cultivate art.
Yeah.
You have to cultivate your artist. You have to work with your artist. You have to encourage your artist. You have to be aware and be listening, the empath in me, listening to my
Exactly.
artist.
Yeah.
When does my artist need to kind of take a step back a little bit? And
Yeah.
maybe we work on a different part of the story and she takes a break from this part of the story. Um, but we pace it. And, when I worked with Natasha, I mean, one of the ways I try to avoid that whole running out the contract was I renegotiated the contract. I said, look, I've asked you to do more work. You've put a lot of good work in. And so I said, I'm going to pay you more because you deserve it. And it was the right thing to do.
Okay.
So you have to realize that too, as the writer, as the holder of the contract, that, it's going to cost you more money. If you're going to do it right, you're going to probably end up paying more than what you think.
Yeah.
And you have to be just with your artists. You can't hold their feet to the fire and say you got a contract because then the art you're going to get this could be garbage.
Right. yeah, this is valuable information for writers, creatives, authors out there. If you're working from the perspective of you only do the writing, you've got to hire out the artwork to another person. Understanding those dynamics is hugely beneficial for them. I appreciate you going into that
Hmm.
because it's huge information. It's a lot of information that many do not think of from the start. But if you can start thinking of that before you begin the process, it allows you to navigate a little bit easier through it.
Right.
And also, too, like you're saying, you being the empath allows you to sense where things may be getting slogged down or slowed down, and you're understanding. All right, what's my the capacity of the artist at this point in time? Do we need to just hold off for a little while? Do we need to shift and pivot into something different so that
Hmm.
she has a
Right.
ability to create something fresh that's rejuvenates her energy?
Right.
That's hugely beneficial. Understanding those concepts as well. I can imagine as well that some of your military experience and teamwork has come into play with that as well. Yes.
I think so. I think one thing as I learned as an Army officer was about planning.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, you come up with a plan, you have to resource your plan. And so I kind of apply that to doing this book. I think, okay, well, how much funds do I need? How much time is it going to take to do the work, the artwork?
Yeah.
Um, Listening to my artist and realizing when you need to throttle back a little bit and
Hmm.
give her a break. Dividing the tasks. Yeah, I would recommend to anyone if you were going to do a project like a huge illustrated book, um, like this, something like this, you need to have your own storyboard artist that's separate from the person that does the final work. It's too
Okay.
much for one artist to do. It would have been, um, it would have taken at least twice as much time for Natasha to do this whole thing by herself, which includes the storyboard work.
Right.
Even if we, and that's not even saying we would have even finished it, because I think doing the storyboard stuff can be, when you're designing the illustrations, there's a certain amount of tension whereas you work with the artist. And and I've worked with Masami as a storyboard artist for a long enough time that we can talk back and forth, and I'll say, no, I think you need to change that,
Right.
or no, that's not exactly what I'm looking for, or I need more, another illustration here, and we talk about it and we design it. There's a lot of back and forth that goes back.
Yeah.
um, some artists are not comfortable with that kind of back and forth.
Right. Right.
So you have to find the right person, and that's very difficult as well.
For sure. For sure. Did you self-publish these, or did you work with a publisher?
Well, I work with an editor service to help
Okay.
create the books.
Yeah.
Um, um, it's Her name was Alexa Nazaro, and she's out of Montreal.
Okay.
So she actually did coach the writing. She corrected the grammar. She hired out subcontract to the translation in French, because the books are available in French as well.
Oh, fantastic.
But I self-published, and a lot, there's some challenge, there's some good and bad in that. The good is you maintain control.
Right.
You maintain control of your work.
Yes.
The bad is that it's very hard to get your book known in the self-published world. Very difficult, even
Yeah.
if you have a good book. And Old Grandmother's Tree is a high quality product. The illustrations, the writing, we made sure we did everything right, because I figured I can't control getting promoted so much, but I certainly can control making sure the book is good.
Right.
So anyway, that's the advantage of self-publishing. But the disadvantage is, like I said, it's very difficult to promote. And unfortunately, there's kind of a stigma to doing self-published. People hear that, oh, this book is self-published, so they'll think you kind of put some half-ass thing together, you slapped it
Sure.
together
Yeah.
just so you can say you published a book,
Yeah.
and it's a vanity project. And that's the kind of perception you're working in when you go in. So the way I try to overcome that is I freely gave away a lot of copies of my books to people.
Okay.
whether they were libraries or bookstores. I said, look, I said, or just people. I
Yeah.
said, I figured the best art advertisement I could do for this book was word of mouth. And that was to get the book in somebody's hand
Yeah.
and to like it. And it's kind of mixed results, to be quite honest, because while a lot of people get the books and they'll be very surprised about how good it is,
Right.
because they think self-published, stigma,
Yeah.
but it doesn't necessarily turn them into a disciple where they're going to preach the gospel of old grandmother's tree and say, go to their knock on their neighbor's door and says, I just discovered this great book. You got to get a copy of it. They're kind of content to tell you that it was really great and I really loved it. And I read it to my grandchildren. I read it to my children. But that doesn't mean that they're going to promote your book for you.
Right.
So it's still a challenge. It's still a challenge. So it's been very slow in that
Okay.
regard. But I have been making steady progress, but it's very slow.
Got you.
My goal is, just to let you know, the goal is when the fourth book is done. This is the third book coming next, but when the fourth one is done, I'm going to start shopping it around for as a screenplay for an animated series because I do believe this book is good enough for it, and it's already
Okay.
storyboarded with beautiful illustrations.
Yeah. You're for sure ahead of the game in that right in that aspect for sure.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I can see it just from the visual behind you. I can see it as an animated series as well. Um, so I think you're definitely on the right thought process and going in that direction. I just intuitively can pick that is a logical move because I think just from talking to you today, I think that the magic, as we described it early on uh, in the conversation, the magic of the book is going to come alive even more so with these other uh, additions to it. When you're thinking about each one of these individual characters and the connections that they have with each other, some of them being animals, some of them being spirit, as the one behind you there, some
Mhm.
of them being real life people. Is it just a fantasy component that takes place that allows you to create this dynamic, or is it derived from some instinctual internal knowingness that this is possible?
I think a lot more of this is instinctual,
Okay.
and it's kind of interesting. You talk about the creative process
Yeah.
that when I designed a lot of these early stories, there are other stories. When I wrote the first story and the second story, I had no idea what I was going to write in the future because I
Okay.
didn't do an outline. I'm not an outline person.
Gotcha.
As I said earlier, I see a story unfold in my mind and like a movie, and I write it out.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that I realized that incorporating a lot of the fantasy elements, there were elements I put into the story that later on became very prominent, important for later stories that I hadn't even thought of yet. So it's almost like my subconscious mind is working at a much deeper level about how this story all fits together.
Yeah.
The shawl that my ancestor receives that she wears, Mithyogoku wears in the story. It's a magical shawl because it started off as just this gray shawl from France that her second husband, Pierre, who came from France, gave her when they got married. But on her wedding night, early in the morning, she wakes up. Medio Goku wakes up. She wraps herself in the shawl and she looks at the stars, and that's where she meets the spirit of her first husband, Asababish. And yeah, that's the spirit right back there. That's
Okay.
him
Yeah.
coming down.
Yeah.
Anyway, he tells her that, you need to look forward. You need to build something beautiful with your life. And because she feels very torn and she's almost apologetic that she married again. And he's like, no, no, no. Says, I'm dead. I'm glad that you married Pierre because I don't want to see you alone.
I got
And
chills again.
Yes. So anyway, this shawl and as a parting gift, Asa Babish, her first husband, he's a spirit. As a parting gift, he grabs the northern lights and he infuses the shawl with that color and that magic. So
Oh
that
wow.
makes the shawl. But I created the shawl with Masami and Natasha. We created that shawl concept long before I knew about where it came from. But we just
Oh
knew when we wrote the first story, the very first story, that shawl is in there. And
wow.
we knew from that very first story that it was magic, but we just didn't know how. But the
Right.
story came out on its own. So there is a deep connection, an operation within the subconscious mind that sometimes creates story, especially when you're dealing, I think, with fantasy stories
Yes.
that create details that are put out there that you're not even aware of, but will pop up later in the story. And you're like, oh my gosh, it's a good thing we put that here in this illustration, this detail, or we mention it in this story because now it's really important in this new story that we wrote.
Yeah.
Um, of course, if you're, what is it, J.R. Martin, the guy who wrote um, Game of Thrones, I
Yeah.
think he probably took the process a little too far. And he's probably totally stuck right now because it's like he's like totally bogged down. So you can
Yes.
take that process too far. But
Right.
for me, it worked out perfectly. And so I think that's where that fantasy came out naturally. And I think I chose the language of folklore style telling because it's a deeper language. I see it not as a story style, but a language style.
Yeah.
So we told the story of Mithyogoku, my ancestor, in the language of a folktale, because a
Right.
folktale language is universal. All
Yeah.
cultures have folktales, and there's such a commonality to it. That's why when you read the story, it'll have a familiar feel to it because it is a folktale, but it's totally original. But you
Yeah.
haven't read it before, but it'll feel that way a little
Right.
bit.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And we'll have the links to all of everything that you have going on, the website, the books, and the
Mhm.
social channels in the description. Um, Truly appreciate you talking with us today and sharing with the audience. Um, it's been an amazing story, amazing ride, walking with you through your life and learning these different aspects of what you've created.
Mhm.
And also, too, I just want to say this, and uh, I want to say it from a place of true gratitude and not flippantly, as a lot of times it is said. But I want to thank you for your service because the the sheer um, the sheer knowledge of taking that oath of potentially laying down your life for the freedoms that I have, it's truly appreciated. Thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
Um, with that, I think this is a fantastic place to us to end today because of all the magic that's culminated and come to the
Sure,
surface here.
sure.
One of the things that I always want to remind the audience at the end is to listen to your heart, but always be kind to your mind. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.